Hello, I'm Leslea Stock-Lopez, and I'm a volunteer with the Alzheimer's Association. I have been a part of the association since 1995, when my father and I were caregivers for my grandmother who had the disease. So I've been really involved with the organization for a long time, and they have really helped guide us. And they did so much for us and for my grandmother that I felt I really wanted to give back. And so here I am today as a representative of the Alzheimer's Association, but I'm also a financial advisor, and my practice does focus on dementia diagnosis planning, which is different than traditional planning. And we'll talk about that as we go through the presentation. So really want to thank Kim for her introduction, and the timing was really great because when we're looking at planning, we need to start with the estate planning documents that help guide us through any financial documents. So the order's great. Thank you, Catherine, for doing such a terrific job. We will be looking at what the Alzheimer's Association has put together as a plan. So you're a caregiver, you're an individual with the diagnosis. What do we do now? And it can seem overwhelming, all the steps. And what we've tried to do is break it down. And we also have a workbook that's helpful to walk you through that. Catherine, did you send that workbook to the group? Or were you able to? Maybe? Okay. Well, if not, if it wasn't sent beforehand, all of the sheets that I'm presenting to you will be available afterwards. So you can take some notes now, but do know that we will be sending those along. Okay. So we'll begin by talking about how caregiving affects finances, and then we'll list the legal and financial documents that should be put into place. Again, just sort of reiterating what we had already heard from Kim as far as those legal documents. And then we'll be preparing for the discussions, all right? Sometimes it's difficult as a caregiver to have those discussions with the individual to encourage them to put a plan together in place. And then we also want to lower the risk of financial abuse and fraud, which is rampant among those who have cognitive decline. And then also creating a backup plan for the caregiver. If we put all of ourselves into being the caregiver and we don't take care of ourselves, we may not be available to help. So it's important to have a backup plan there as well. We'll also have some videos from those who have actually gone through this process. I think it's really great to hear from others. Our Alzheimer's support groups are just that factor that we can listen to others who have been through the scenario and help us craft our own care plan for the individual that we're caring for. Alzheimer's is so unique in that everyone responds to the disease differently, travels through the phases differently. And so having others to bounce ideas off of is very critical. Just some key terms. When I say caregiver, that's anyone that's assisting someone that is in need. So it could be a family member, it could be a legal guardian, it could be somebody that we are paying to come in and support the individual. And then also that caregiver or care partner is also the person that's handling the money, maybe paying bills and expenses for the individual. If we're talking about finances, we're basically anything that touches money that has a value, a home, investment accounts, bank accounts, etc. And then finally, when we say financial literacy, we really want to understand all of the components that go into it. So this presentation is to help you with your financial literacy so that you're very confident in moving forward and being the best caregiver that you can be. So the cost of caregiving, right? It can be extensive. And that's why having financial literacy is so important. So with most illnesses, the time frame, it seems to be a little bit shorter on physical illnesses versus cognitive, right? And we'll talk about some timing on that in a few minutes. But what you're doing here today is going to help with that financial literacy, and again, making you the best caregiver that you can be. Now, we do have a couple questions. I'd love to hear from you, and you can put this in the chat about your answers to some of these questions. And this helps craft my presentation to you as far as the level of information that you have. All right. So our first knowledge check here is what percentage of caregivers have out-of-pocket costs as a result of caregiving? I'd love to see you answer that into the chat, whether you think it's 47%, 67%, 78%, or 95%. Anybody want to take a guess for me? Thank you, Nettie. Good. Right. So very educated group that we have here, and we know that it's on the upper end. And at this point, it's 78%. So more than 3/4 of caregivers have out-of-pocket costs as a part of their regular caregiving. This is inclusive of household expenses as well as medical expenses, expenses for living and all kinds of supplies, etc. That's a very big impact. Put that chat down. And so not only is it a financial impact, but many times the caregiver has to change their employment scenario. So some folks may reduce their hours, go from full-time to part-time. Others have to quit their job completely. My stepfather also had dementia. My mother was working and she had to leave her job so that she could care for him. And so that has a huge impact, right? Less household income, maybe more debt, more difficult for people to save if they're not working anymore. They may not be contributing to their 401k plan at work. And all of these things have a big impact, not only on the individual with dementia, but also the person that's caring for them. Let's hear from one of our caregivers on this exact topic.
So some of the sacrifices I've had to make financially due to having to care for my mom were things like paying for some of her care, doctor visits in some cases, clothing, to try to limit the spend down of her money. So I supplemented where I could and then retired early, which impacted my income to continue to care for her, and then looking into getting a part-time job to supplement her memory care, facility care.
All right, so big impact. Oh, Catherine, we have a blue stripe through the presentation. If maybe you can help me with that. So again, impact on health for the caregiver, right? If you're giving all of yourself to the individual, sometimes we neglect ourselves. And a lot of times that has an impact, right? Maybe not getting the doctor visits in that you need to take care of, putting off doing things that are good for your health. And when that happens, the caregiver gets sick, then we've got double problems, right? Not only do we not have someone to help with mom or dad or brother or sister, but we also have to take care of ourselves, and that could have a financial impact as well. So very important. All right. No, the blue streak's not coming from my system. But I hope no one minds us having that in there, because I don't have control of that. So let's see. All right, thank you for the tip. Clear. Hey, thank you very much. All right, I learned something new today. Appreciate it. And open up the presentation for full. It should already be. Getting some really good comments. I appreciate that. Let's see. The presentation should be full. Does anybody have any tips on how we get to that? All right, I'm going to keep going until we figure this out. So basically, how Alzheimer's disease can affect your finances. And we'll go back to our chat. Now, again, testing some of our knowledge. Is Alzheimer's a normal part of aging? Who says yes? And who says no? Anyone want to take a guess? Okay, false. Some say false, some say no. Okay, all right. That is exactly true. It is not a normal part of aging. It is a progressive and fatal brain disease. And so we want to make sure that we understand that Forgetting some things may be an issue, but the depth of dementia is not a normal part of aging. Thank you for those who are participating. Appreciate that. Right? How about our next question? Does it only affect a person's memory? Anybody want to jump in on that? Does it affect a person's memory? No, false, false. Very good. All right. And of course, that is true. It does impact someone's memory, but thinking and behavior are also included. I have spoken with many people who say that their mother, father, etc., completely different personality than what they had before. And so that can be attributed to Alzheimer's. It definitely has an impact there, and it really impacts the ability to manage money. Okay, I want to go back here because someone gave me an idea about expanding since you're sharing from a OneDrive, you have it as a full screen. Okay. So yeah, I think we're doing the best that we can, and thank you for your patience. So on the disease, there's early, middle, and late, and there are no real boundaries between them. And I know that's difficult as a caregiver because people will say, well, what stage is mom in? Well, mom might be in the middle stages for some aspects of her life and maybe the early or late in others. So it's very fluid. And I'm not trying to not give you an answer, but I'm just saying that this disease is so unique to each individual that they basically travel through each one of these stages and sort of overlap. So when we look at the early stages, some of the characteristics on early, let me go back there. Some of the characteristics on early is that an individual is still able to take care of themselves, and this is the time when we want to put those financial plans in place. Right? When the person is still able to have a conversation, they still have capacity, which is what Kim talked about. They can sign documents. They know what they want. There's memory issues. There may be some issues with words or math, but they are still able to live independently and take care of themselves. As we travel through the middle stage, that starts to decline. Maybe having trouble understanding where they are, what day of the week it is, what season it is. Things become much more difficult. And then in the later stages, they are not able to be on their own. They must have care, right? So I talked about this earlier as far as the time frame. So the average nursing home stay for a physical ailment is around 3 years. But Alzheimer's, from diagnosis to end of life, can be anywhere from 4 to 8 years. I know my grandmother, it was 9 years. And that is why the impact to the finances is so great, because it has such a long time frame. That's why planning is so important. Okay. So impacting the ability to manage money, right? So in the beginning, people may have some trouble, may forget to pay a bill, but as the disease gets worse, they're not going to be able to communicate their wishes or decisions. Bills may pile up. You'll see a lot of issues there. And that's why this early planning is so critical to everyone involved in the process. So as we see the financial impact of caregiving, the income goes down from a caregiver perspective, or the individual is not able to work, the individual with the diagnosis. So income's going down, but costs are continuing to rise. Let's hear from a caregiver on this scenario.
So when we finally moved into assisted living, when we first got the cost, it was going to be $5,000 a month. When we started adding on daily medications and housekeeping and all the other things that come with it, we were quickly at $6,000 per month. In my mind, every month I was, doing the calculations of, all right, how much money does Dad have left? How long can this last? What happens when that goes away?
Right. And that's why planning is so important, so we can address those things ahead of time. Right. So what are some of the unique challenges for caregivers? Right. Well, they have twice as much out-of-pocket costs. Many experience depression. It's hard to see someone you love change, and they can be a completely different person. My mother would say about my stepfather that he is not the person that she married. He was very changed from a personality perspective. 44% have anxiety. Sure, it's very anxiety producing to help and care for someone with Alzheimer's. And then women are more likely to experience this stress. We tend to be the caregivers. It's the wife, it's the eldest daughter that tend to be the ones responsible for at least the initial care. And then that has a big impact on them. So let's test our knowledge again. Can people younger than 65 develop Alzheimer's? Anybody want to chime in here with any thoughts? Is that true or false? Okay, thank you for participating. Yeah. Okay, and that's absolutely true. We call that early onsets Alzheimer's, and they can develop it. It tends to be less common. It also has a shorter time frame from diagnosis to end of life, but it is absolutely possible. And those who have early onset, they have additional problems because if someone is diagnosed in their 50s, they're right in the middle of working. They're going to have to stop working. That means less assets are available, right? May not be eligible for certain benefits, and that can be a huge strain to the family. Also, those in the LGBTQ community tend to be single. Not all have children, so they don't have that support system and that team together, and so that can be very impactful for that particular individual. And then those in low income, right? They basically had fewer opportunities for their future growth, may not have saved as much, may not have the same kind of medical coverage. And so all of that really builds up. And so these particular groups may have additional struggles in addition to those that we've already talked about. So our next step here is to talk about what the benefits are of early planning, right? And so let's ask again, who do you think benefits from early planning? Is it just people with money, or those who are retiring soon? Is it the caregiver? Is it low-income households, or is it everyone? Anybody want to chime in? Love it. It's great. Thank you. You're absolutely correct. Everyone. So I'm a financial advisor and I do plans for all of my clients. That's because everyone should have a plan in place for their future. That helps to guide you to a successful future, right? So if you're putting these plans into place, it really gives you a much better opportunity for success. And I think it's even more important for a chronic illness. Like I said, I do financial planning, and we really focus on those with that dementia diagnosis. People say, well, what's the difference between it? It's a big difference between the cost of care is great. We have to make sure that's been accounted for, as well as having all those legal documents in place. So there are benefits on both sides of the coin for those who are caring for and those who are living with. So for the caregiver, it's a great sense to know this is exactly, what my spouse or my mom or dad wanted, right? When you make decisions for them, you're confident that that's the right decision. That's a decision they would have made for themselves if they were able to do so. It helps you be able to anticipate the financial issues, kind of anticipate what that care cost is going to be. And then again, making less costly mistakes, maybe liquidating an investment account that may have fees or expenses that if you would have waited a little bit longer, you wouldn't have. So again, making good decisions, not doing things on the spur of the moment. Let's hear from a caregiver and from an expert from the Alzheimer's Association.
One of the benefits of putting financial plans in place for caregivers is simply peace of mind. Oftentimes we have a lot of anxiety and fear about the unknown. How long is the disease going to last? What are the care needs going to be? When we think of all of those things that we might be apprehensive about, and we put plans in place for if this happens, here's how we'll handle it. and we really think through, here's what's typical with the disease, here's what I need to be thinking about, and here's my plan for that. It can be such a gift to the whole family because people can settle in and focus on, here's what I need to focus on today, here's what I need to think about right now, without the weight of the what ifs hanging over their head.
Well said. And from a caregiver.
My mother, by putting plans in place early, that really helped me because it gives me a sense of confidence that I'm doing the things that she really wants to be done. It allows me to not have to worry about decisions that I make because my mother has already laid out the plan. She's stated her wishes, and my role is really to execute those plans. I have found that making decisions for my own situation can often be difficult. And so it's even harder to make decisions, especially when it comes to medical decisions, financial decisions. To have that responsibility of making those decisions for someone else can be very, very difficult. So in that my mother was so prepared and had laid out financial plans and really had a structure around her life, that has really allowed me to be less anxious as I perform the caregiving role.
Yes. So well said. And we certainly want to reduce our anxiety level, and that does help. So the benefits for the individual with the diagnosis is that they can say, hey, this is exactly what I want. And I want to make sure that all the things that I've put in place will be executed, and kind of gives them a sense of relief so they can focus on their own health, go off and take those trips and be as engaged as they can for as long as they can. Let's hear from our expert.
One benefit of planning early for the person with the disease is that they get to have their say. They get to say, here is how I want things to play out. If there's ever a time when I can't live alone or when I need this kind of care, here's how I'd like that to happen. Here's who I want to be making decisions on my behalf if I can't make them for myself. So they get to have their say. In addition, they get to make choices about how they live their life, what they do now and in the months and years to come, with this additional knowledge of, hey, I've got this disease and here's what I can expect. And so a lot of people tell us that they choose differently, and they choose differently from each other. I talked to one person with Alzheimer's who said, you know what, I want every day to be regular. I want to work in my flower beds. I want to play with my grandkids. I want to have lunch with a friend. I just want lots of great regular days. I've talked to other folks with dementia diseases who said, I want to do the things I've been looking forward to. I want to take some big trips, or I want to do some really special things with the people I'm close to. So it's not the same for everybody, but the person with the disease gets to make choices and gets to live life more on their terms.
Right. And isn't that what we want for those that we care and love? Definitely, for they can have those choices. So having the conversation, that can be difficult, right? Talking about money can make people anxious. If it's with a parent, and there's always been this, we just don't talk about money in our family, we understand that is not an easy conversation to have. So we've kind of helped with that. The Alzheimer's Association has some ideas and suggestions that may be helpful. And basically, we want to write down the goals of what we want to say, right? So write it down, have it kind of choreographed in our minds. We want to make sure that the person that's delivering that message, trusted family member, friends, want to make sure that it's a calm and easy conversation. We don't think that having a team of people come in, all the kids together and say, Mom, this is what we think you need to do, that can become intimidating to the individual. So just kind of a nice one-on-one, but talk about it in a casual way. Don't rush. And sometimes those conversations need to be had multiple times. You don't have to eat the elephant all in one sitting, right? Small bits will get you to the success in the end that you're looking for. So any additional tips here is, that we know it can be hard to ask about these and managing finances. And when you're working with someone with dementia, it's hard for them to focus. So you just want to make sure that you have their best goal in mind, right? Think about their wishes and don't judge what those wishes might be. If mom or dad wants to take a really wonderful trip, let them do it, right? As long as it's within the budget, of course, right? And if a person has difficulty communicating, speak in small sentences, have it done in a scenario that's very easy for them to communicate. Let's hear from one of our caregivers.
Advice I'd have for other caregivers if the conversation about finances doesn't go well at first is to keep trying. It took a while for my mom to come around, and I was exasperated. I would try to catch her at a good moment, and sometimes she'd give me a little tidbit here or there, so it might take time to just pull it all together. It's sort of trying to understand the moment if you're having a good time. What I did also was to bring up friends. My mother was very empathetic, so if I'd say, oh, remember so-and-so? They had a situation with their mom or dad or family member where something happened and the person didn't know what to do or they didn't have understanding about it. So that was really hard on them. She'd say, oh, really? And I'd say, yeah, see, that would help me if, we talked about that kind of thing. And that would usually get her. So in my case, that empathy is what I would kind of try to use for her to open up more, but continuing to do it, catching on a good day. That was key because it took time and it was piecemeal. Small victories, just get as much as you can over time and keep at it, because there usually will be a window where you can kind of break through, or in some cases it might be someone else has to talk to them.
All really good advice. So again, we want to start with positive statements. You don't say, hey, Mom, you're acting very forgetful. Maybe you have Alzheimer's, right? We never want to say something like that. We want to come in with a more positive statement about something that they've done with their finances and how you'd like to help. And again, if the individual is approaching you, if they're saying things like, I'm not quite sure I understand about my finances, be open to that conversation. And so part of the documentation that the Alzheimer's has is some worksheets. And the first one is having the conversation. And like I said, we really think that you need to write things down and be prepared for that conversation, kind of what you want to accomplish, and then talk about the timing and everything like that. So I think that that's very helpful for you. Utilize those sheets. And then we also want to just touch base briefly on the abuses, financial abuses. I know we're kind of running short on time, so I'm going to go quickly through this. But on average, how much money does an 80-year-old lose because of frauds or scams? It's amazing. $39,200. That is horrible. And studies show that that's probably underestimated. People with cognitive decline are, from the scammers' point of view, are just easy pickings. And it's disgusting and it's horrible, but we have to be aware of it. So that's why managing the finances is so important, so that we can stop this from happening. So we want to make sure that that access to their investments and accounts have some guardrails around them, because they may not remember having these conversations, and having good financial decisions is difficult for that individual. So a signs that a person might be having problems with money is you're seeing unopened bills, utilities get shut off. You'll see these large purchases for things that they've never bought before, or things that they don't need, like dog food when they have a cat, right? Buying the same item multiple times from like the shopping channel or Amazon, giving excessive donations to telemarketers. Everyone that calls, they say, sure, I'll send you money. And then missing money, or unexplained withdrawals where, okay, Mom, you withdrew this money, but where did it go? So these are signs that our individual is having problems with money. And so some of the ways that we can lower this abuse and fraud is to have one of those credit cards that basically is loaded with some funds, and then that's it. So it can't be excessive. Don't have it linked to a bank account with a lot of money in it, right? Have separate accounts for recreational spending. Okay, mom, we've got $200 a month that you can spend whatever you'd like, because you want the individual to have a sense of self. They want to be able to have that freedom and autonomy, but we want to put some guardrails around it. Set up auto pay. This is something that I do for my clients with the dementia diagnosis. We do auto pay for all of their utility bills, so we don't have issues of shutoffs and not payment. Set up automatic notifications. So when you see those large withdrawals, if you're the caregiver, you can see it, you can nip it in the bud right away. Definitely sign them up for the do not call list, and then tell those credit card companies, hey, stop sending us, those checks, because that's problematic. And part of our activities here is ways to abuse the financial fraud. And so you'll see everything that I've just talked about in little check boxes here. You can go through it, and then what to do if you suspect fraud. And that, I think, is really critical. Okay. So now we are on the identifying the legal and financial needs. And again, Kim talked about the legal needs, so I'll go through that quickly. But when we're looking at income spending, we want to write down, when we're putting together the plan, we want to write down all monies in and monies out, right? Just so we know where we stand, right? We're trying to put a budget together for the individual, right? And then we kind of look at that and we can say, we could probably reduce some of these. Mom doesn't ever watch Netflix. Maybe we can, move that off, or maybe we can use a different cable program with not 200 stations, maybe 100 will do, right? And then try to build up a savings for unexpected care. And part of our activity sheet has a list of all of these things, very helpful for you to start putting that together. Then we want to take an inventory of the assets. So this could be cars, homes, boats, everything like that, physical assets, and then also bank accounts and IRAs, 401ks, all of those areas. We want to see, what do we have as our money bank? And then we want to look at the debts as well. So do we have a mortgage? Do we have a car payment? What things need to be paid on both sides? Then we can identify the cost of care. So what are we anticipating for ongoing medical treatments now, in the future? What are our prescription drug costs? What about personal care supplies? Adult day services. So maybe mom needs to go to a adult daycare where her brain can be stimulated. She has social interaction. There's a cost to that. And then later on in the disease, when we need to bring in care, or we need to go to a residential care, what kind of cost is that going to be, based on the fact that now we know all of the assets we have and the debts as well. So we have a better idea of our finances. And then, of course, making arrangements for ongoing financial responsibility. So setting up those automatic bill pays and arranging for benefit claims, right? If we're eligible for certain benefits from Social Security, from the Veterans Administration, et cetera, we want to make that happen. And then making investment decisions that will help support the income that we need, and preparing for tax returns. So I know all of that is like, my head is spinning, and I totally understand that. So that's why we have come up with our worksheet that kind of lets you easily write all this down. So here's the covering the cost of care in money and out money. And then expenses, we can kind of check off some of those if we need to reduce them. And then some other ways to reduce your monthly expenses. So my suggestion here is you don't have to do all of this at once, just do it in little bits. So again, some of common funding sources for personal assets would be pensions, 401ks, any kind of stock accounts, bonds, CDs, bank accounts, etc. And then there are federally funding resources that we don't want to forget. Veterans do have benefits that are related to Alzheimer's, so that's important. Medicare, of course, A, B, and Part D for drugs. And then there's Social Security disability insurance. That's not the same as the Social Security. If a person is eligible for disability insurance, we want to tap that if possible. And then the Compassionate Allowance Initiative is something that's put into law that accelerates your application for Social Security disability insurance. And it's fabulous because Alzheimer's, we need the monies and the funds now, and it allows you to accelerate those. And then there's state funding. Of course, there's Medicaid and Medigap insurance, and then also additional resources. And you can do that at benefitscheckup.org. You can go to that website and see if there are any other state funded benefits that you may be eligible for. Okay, so on the legal planning, we really talked about the legal plans, but I will say we can't do the financial planning and changes until we have the legal in place. So the powers of attorney that Kim had talked about, really, really critical to get those things in place, have those conversations with the individual before they have lost capacity. And that once those are in place, then things will move much quicker. And then the reviewing of the documents. Kim also mentioned that powers of attorneys get a little old after 3 years. My firm and operations will not accept a power of attorney that's 5 years or older. So as soon as that diagnosis comes in, really important to update that power of attorney so that you don't run into any headwinds like that. So I recommend that. I think that that's terrific. And as the disease progresses, it's important to have these things updated. Again, we have a worksheet that has organizing the legal plans. All of this is laid out for you on what you need, what it does for you. And then you can have a little checklist that says, okay, I still need the home health care. Let's get that into place. And then also when it was at last updated. So we make sure things are as fresh as possible. Okay. Now, the Alzheimer's Association has help for this for you as well. And if you go to alz.org CRF, okay, that's Community Resource Finder. So what do we have locally that can help you? We really think that that is a great way of getting started with the plan and finding some resources. And then also eldercare.acl.gov is also another great resource to find for financial and legal professionals in your area. Lastly, we're going to talk about taking care of you, the caregiver. What if something happens to you and you're not able to take care of the individual? That's why we are big proponents of a team scenario for an Alzheimer's diagnosis and care. Right? So have a friend or a family member who can be backup. As a caregiver, you need rest and respite. You need to take a vacation. It is extremely difficult. I don't have to tell you. If you're in the situation, you understand that, but you need to recharge your batteries. So you need to have a backup, right? Now, what we also recommend is kind of sprinkling out the responsibilities. Don't be the person that takes on everything. Maybe someone can do the financial part, and another person can take care of taking doctor visits and being that key person for the doctor visits. So again, doesn't have to be one person. You definitely want to designate a trusted backup agents for the power of attorney. Kim had also talked about having one person as the power of attorney, but then if that person is unavailable, having another and a third. Very good recommendation. And then very important to keep up that list of medications and doctors and contacts. So have that available in somewhere that's in a public space, or maybe it's on a Google Drive that's shared by everyone who's part of the care team, so that if one person is not available, that information is available to other people. And we've got to take care of ourselves. It's a 24/7 job of taking care of someone with Alzheimer's. And so we recommend that you do some self-care, visit the doctor regularly, eat well, physical activity, have somebody relieve you, even if it's just for a couple hours, to have a nice lunch, a massage, a facial, something that's all about you, because you must recharge your battery to be the best caregiver that you can be for that individual. The Alzheimer's Association is here to help. We have a toll-free number 24/7. It's 800-272-3900. We have over 500 languages that we are able to talk to folks with. Spanish and English, we can pretty much always find someone on the line. If it's a language that is maybe not as common, then we will get a translator in and have the translation done. And like I said, we talk in 500 languages. We are set. Our online is alz.org, and you can find a multitude of information for caregivers and those with the disease, and lots of ways of helping. And I've already talked about our community resource finder, and basically you just plug in Houston and it will pinpoint those community organizations that can help and support you. Let's hear from our expert.
Even if you have a financial plan in place, you can still find yourself challenged by the day-to-day financial realities. And if a person feels overwhelmed or needs help, there's so much help available through the Alzheimer's Association. That's a great place to start. You can get a lot of information on our website at alz.org. You can also call our 24-hour helpline at 1-800-272-3900. We're staffed round the clock. We've got dementia care experts, master's level counselors and social workers who are ready to talk when you are and are happy to talk through whatever issues you're going through.
Right. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you. So one thing I would like that we suggest is that I know we've gone through a lot and you've learned a lot during this conference. Just write down 1 or 2 things that you're going to do to move forward. And again, do it in small steps when you have the time available, with that end goal in mind of creating that plan that will help you and the person living with the illness. Okay, so now